Welcome to Like a Champion podcast, where we talk to leaders from all walks of life. I am your host, Wes Shelton. This is episode 2 with Jack Roach, former USA national swimming coach. Jack was part of 3 U.S. national swim teams, Olympic teams from 2008 to 2016, and coached such notable champions as Michael Phelps, Katie Ledecky, Aaron Pearsall, Dana Vollmer, Ryan Lochte, et cetera, et cetera. I lost track of the number of medals that these folks won while Jack was there. And he became this sort of sage of U.S. swimming and this liaison between the junior team and the senior squad during his years there. And Jack has this quiet way of mentoring his subjects, and we delve into his leadership principles and how he became the coach that he became. And watching some of the postings and such on social media from Phelps and some of these other swimmers, and it's clear that they look upon him like a fatherly uncle figure, and he became a sort of refuge for these younger up-and-coming athletes who were swimming in a super high-pressure environment on these national teams and on the world stage. And he talks a little bit about those moments, those sort of penultimate moments where all the emotion hits and of these and the gravity of the moment. And just love talking to Jack and hearing about his experiences and his travels and working with these champions who have trained since such a young age to become Olympic swimmers and medalists. And so, we talk about the making of an Olympian. We talk about the perfect stroke, and Jack talks about living life on borrowed time. So this is Like a Champion, episode 2 with Jack Roach, USA national swim coach. Hope you enjoy.
Somebody who works with business owners on a daily basis and people who, for business, it's personal too. It's family, it's friends, and this size of enterprises that we deal with are very personal. They involve, wives and children in the business and out of the business and longtime employees and stuff. So I love talking to people who are in positions of leadership, whatever that might look like and whatever industry that might look like, and trying to bring it all in and learn maxims and principles and practices that, may apply to the lives of people that I deal with on a daily basis. So just a quick intro on you for those who don't know. I saw you've been coaching since 1972, which is incredible. Coaching swimming, notably starting at Mission Bay here in South Florida, moving out to University of Texas, and then probably most notably at USA Swimming out in Colorado Springs, coaching 3 different Olympic teams, 2008, 2012, and 2016, and coaching some of the most notable decorated medalists in Olympic history, which is always cool to see. On Instagram, I've seen pictures with you and guys like Michael Phelps and Aaron Pearsall and Ryan Lochte, and now you are moved on to be the head coach and CEO at Virginia Tide, Virginia Beach, and so kind of a next phase in your career, and so that's a little bit about you. I wanted to start and just by asking, what got you into coaching? And when did you know, or was there an epiphany that it was something that you wanted to do for your career and the rest of your life?
First, Wes, thank you for having me on. This is special in probably a way that people that listen to this, I won't be able to impact them the way that this is impacting me, because you're family and we haven't seen each other in quite a while. And it's funny how with certain people and certainly family, as time goes by, we still seem to move in a direction that keeps us connected. And when you reached out to me, it just, so many different memories flooded through my mind. You as a child, and the two of us with your black lab walking together through Birch State Park. It just, yeah, it's special. It's very special in many ways.
Great times.
and I want to honor that. Yeah, getting into coaching, it was like it was just bound to happen. In middle school, probably the first indicator to me was before middle school, I had played midget football, and I was probably all of 75 pounds. I was a little guy, although I still am,
Yeah.
but I was probably all of 75 pounds and went to middle school, which back when I was in middle school, it was seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. So in the seventh grade, I go out for football. And there was a coach there by the name of Terrell Hall, who after about the first week saw me just getting pounded. He pulled me over and he goes, "Hey, Jack, I need someone else to help me coach. I would like you to reconsider going out for the team as a player and help me coach." And I looked at him and I go, "Well, Coach Hall, I don't want to be a water boy." He goes, "No, no, no. You aren't going to be the manager. You're going to help me coach." And if you can picture the male dressing room in a middle school where you go down these stairs and you're in this basement and there's this cage with all the equipment in it. And there's Mr. Hall's office. So from that day on, I'm going in early and we are literally setting up the game plan. And he's asking me advice when we're on the field during games and in practice. So he saw something in me. I know that he was trying to protect me, but he saw something in me that made me, it built my self-esteem. And I knew right away that probably coaching was going to be my career. Well, I knew it was going to be my career. I wasn't sure in what sport. I took swimming very seriously, track and field very seriously, and wrestling very seriously. And the swimming influence on my side was a guy by the name of Dick Fadgett, who entered my life when I was 10 or 11 years old. He was a swimmer at NC State and would come to my hometown during the summers and coach a competitive swim team in Statesville, North Carolina. And Dick was a national record holder and a world record holder at different times in his life. And he had a wife and a child, and they would come in after working at NC State and work with the local team in Statesville. And he and I became very close, and he started to take me to Rhode Island at the end of the summer and compete in open water swimming. Mm. So the two of those guys really did kind of open the door for sport as this beautiful lifestyle, and watching the impact that both of those men made on people as I went through my years of being trained by them. It was life lasting, the things that I saw happen. And then probably another man that had a huge influence on me was a guy by the name of George Plimpton. Do you know that name by chance?
He was an actor, wasn't he?
Writer and actor, yeah. And he kind of pulled the curtain open for what big time sport was like. I think his most notable, he would write and then he would embed himself in these different pro sports teams. Mm. And the Paper Lion, when he embedded himself with the Detroit Lions as a player, and he really opened the door to see how cool it was to have a career in sport. And I was hooked.
Yeah. And so why swimming, Jack? You mentioned the three sports, which not coincidentally, I don't think, do not rely on weight and size necessarily.
Yeah, right. Yeah, swimming. I probably initially I was influenced by swimming because I did love the water. I spent a lot of time surfing and sailing when I was younger, and water skiing. Water was a big impact on my life, and I felt very comfortable in the water. And I think Dick Fadgett, the man that I mentioned earlier, he stayed in touch with me longer than any of the other coaches. And as I was leaving, I can't remember when I decided, okay, it's going to be swimming. I ended up going to school post-military and majored in physical education, and really didn't see a lot of opportunity to have a career in a particular sport and make enough money off of it to support a family. And that was a little bit of a consideration, but I did ultimately end up in swimming. And when I look back, not knowing these things, the structure, the way that USA Swimming is structured, it is something that I can really wrap my head around. When you get to a certain level, there's a quad plan. And if we look at the elite level of swimming, that quad plan is what happens every 4 years. And you watch an Olympic Games. The next step is, if you stay on the national team and you're working on that level, is you go to World Championships, which is no different than the Olympic Games for the athlete. There are just not as many people watching them, but it's the same competitors. It's the same electric, high pressure environment. And from there, you go to the Pan-Pacific Games as the second year of a quad. World Championships, Pan-Pacifics, and the European countries have their own European championships. And so the Pacific Rim countries, which are Canada, Australia, Japan, and the US, started a competition during that same year so that they had an international competition, and anyone can come to it, but they're the governing bodies of that competition. And then you have World Championships again, and then you have the Olympic Games. And that's something that I can really wrap my head around. I can help people focus in on that. We can talk about how we move in that direction. I just really love the structure of that. And I think the sport in general, not just swimming, but sport in general, I like to say that we as people in sport don't do a very good job of promoting sport the way that it should be promoted. I believe that when you're working in sport, you are actually giving an unofficial PhD in team. And when I say an unofficial PhD in team, what I mean by that is people that do sport year round, they know what a good teammate is like. They know what a bad teammate looks like. They already have that. By the time they're 18 years old, they already have that 10,000 hour rule that we talk about so often, and being able to really find mastery in what they're doing. And does that, and I think that the depth, the importance of that, and what I find in that to be so crucial to the growing of a young person is that this next generation, I mean, golly, we can look at it right now, this generation, the issues that they're going to be faced with aren't going to be solved by one bright mind. It's going to take a group of people that know how to work together to solve these environmental problems, to solve educational challenges, health issues right now. I often wonder how many sports people are working in the medical field to find a vaccine for what's going on with this virus, because it takes people that know how to work together. In no other part of a young person's life do they learn how to work with people the way they do in sport. And then with swimming, it's even more special because men and women train together, boys and girls train together. Mm-hmm. And that striding together to achieve something, that coming to someone's aid when they're challenged by what's going on, it's very special to me.
Yeah. On that note, I've noticed a lot in articles that I've read and posts on social media. This has been one of the positive aspects of social media, not all of, but it seems like you've come to be sort of a sage for these young athletes, and you've settled into this role of, just like a quiet mentor and a sage, and maybe a dad or an uncle away from home. What is it about your personality and the way you're wired that you think resonates with these young athletes?
Yeah, I could attribute a lot of it to circumstance. Once I got the job with USA Swimming, Meredith and I moved from, I was coaching the national team and the Olympic team in Mexico
Mm.
for 5 years. I got out of the sport for a while. And then when I got back in the sport, Meredith and I had been married in Mexico. And I said, why don't we try this somewhere else? She always knew that I would get back in the sport. She said that I didn't realize how fortunate I was to be working with the level of young person that I was working with. I was leaving Texas when I did stop coaching for a while, and she said, "You're going to get back into it." And I didn't necessarily think that I wasn't, but when we did get married, I did feel like it was time to leave Austin and the University of Texas, or we both felt that way, and start kind of a new life together. And we got married in Mexico, and I'd gotten to know the minister of sport relatively well. And he had said, well, why don't you come down to Mexico and look around and find a spot you want to coach, and we'll figure something out. And so we did that and ended up in a place called San Luis Potosi, where there was this $300 million training facility at altitude. And I ran the facility, and he sent the national team swimmers to me. And actually, not many people know this, but I was the head coach for the Mexican Olympic team in 2004. So I was in the 2004 Olympic Games as well. And so I left there when I was offered a job at USA Swimming in Colorado Springs. And we moved to Colorado Springs. Now, the training center's there, and all of the elite level swimmers are going to run through there through the course of a quad year. And this allowed me to get to know them on a level that not many people get to know them. And my home was somewhat of a sanctuary. Plus, I was one of the few people that had a car where I could go to the Olympic Training Center and help them escape from the training center and go out on hikes or go to coffee shops. And I started to form relationships, and I started to form these relationships for a couple of reasons. But I was hired as the national junior team director of USA Swimming, and that was a brand new program. We had never had a national junior team director, and we had never focused in on the junior team the way that the man who hired me, as we started to talk, decided that we could really impact international swimming on a national level much faster if we start to prepare these younger kids for international competition. And so Mark Schubert, who was the national team director, and I started to look at how we could create a 4-year plan for a national junior team member, someone who was 18 or younger. And we, with the help of our international governing body, which is FINA, we created a junior world championship. And then with the help of the Pan-Pac people, we created a junior Pan-Pac championship. And so we started to take these 18 and under kids that were basically set up the same way as the national team. If you're top 6 in each Olympic event, then you're on the national junior team, and you usually end up with about 100 to 120 swimmers. And started to bring them to camps, and I started to expose them to national team swimmers, which meant I needed to get to know the national team swimmer better. And pretty soon I sort of like was no longer a coach. I was more of a mentor and someone who could get to know a national team swimmer that I felt like had a great relationship with a national junior team swimmer, and then bring them together. And that's where I started to create these relationships that were based on trust. People started to share with me their challenges in the sport and their dreams in the sport. And I do believe at some point I somewhat became the glue of the national team and the national junior team.
And so that was the mark that you feel like you left in USA Swimming, is bringing those two together. And you think?
I after I left USA Swimming and, we moved to Norfolk, Virginia, as my wife started medical school, USA Swimming kept me on as a consultant for 1 year, basically in the same role I was in to get through the 2016 Olympic Games so that there wouldn't be any kind of disconnect in what had been created at that point. And then after I was moved to a position of consultant for gold medal clubs in USA Swimming. And a gold medal club I think there are 3,000 club teams in USA Swimming. And every year you're recognized based solely on performance. You're distinguished as a gold medal club or a silver medal club or a bronze medal club. And that may encompass, of those 3,000 teams, 200 teams. And the gold medal clubs are the top 20 teams. And I believe that when I started to do that, I was starting to take these stories and these lessons that I feel like I observed and watched national team swimmers learn and national junior team swimmers learn as they moved through the ranks, to a different level athlete that had those same kind of dreams. And probably I'm going to be remembered more for the stories I took to those gold medal teams than anything else, because I'm constantly being called by coaches from all over the country and go, can you Zoom with me and maybe bring an athlete on that you told the story with and share those same kind of experiences. I heard this saying once a few years, it's actually a long time ago. Talk to me and I'll listen. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. Tell me a story and I'll remember it forever. And so I started to create these lessons that I felt like were so important to not just sport, but just young people's growth, that are about swimming, but they're not about swimming. And I just have pages and pages of logbooks where I was at an international competition with a swimmer, and I always am learning from these athletes, and I'm jotting down these stories, and I come back and I go, yeah, this is one I could use.
Do you write these down, these stories and life lessons and stuff, or are you a journal?
I quite often give PowerPoints on it, but more, it's interesting. Like when I was, for 8 straight years, so through 3 Olympic Games, I went to every single international competition with the national junior team and the national team. And golly, there's so much value to be gained from that. And I was the only person with USA Swimming that did that. And so that, there was just all of this information that I found to be so valuable to share with people in our sport.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm switching gears on you a little bit. I had heard this story and wasn't sure how true it was. And then I heard it repeated on a podcast that you did recently, that on your 65th birthday, you put on your running shoes and went out the door and ran 65 miles. Is that anywhere close to accurate? Because that would be an amazing story.
It's true. I did it for a reason. Number one is I'm in Colorado Springs and I can celebrate the wilderness that I live in those mountains, and they're actual trails. And I got to know these running trails very well because I am a very avid runner, and I was running every day that I could run up there. And they're trails that you can go from Colorado Springs to Denver, which is, it's on the trails. It was about, I think I had figured out the trail that I was going to run and the switchbacks that I was going to make. It was going to be almost 60 miles, and I'd figured out how I would add a little bit more to get the 65 in. And I did it really for one reason. My mom, what a wonderful person. she made these baby books that were basically scrapbooks. They started out as baby books. And I have these books that are literally, a half a foot thick. I have 4 of them of my life. And she had passed away less than a year before I did this. And I sat down a week before I was going to do the run. And I wrote down everything that she had written during that particular year of my life that she felt was influenced me as to who I am as a person. And so during that run, I had something to think about for every mile. And it was to honor her.
Yeah, that's incredible. I bet she'd be proud of you, Jack. She would be. And so you did that run through the trails. You went to Denver and did it, or you went out and you turned back and.
I ended up in Denver and got picked up by Meredith, my wife, and I ended up going 68 miles because I got lost. But, it was, I was in pretty good shape back then, and I know that I did it in less than 10 hours.
If you had to say, was there a penultimate moment, peak moment in your career as a coach where you felt like, that was the highest of highs in your career? Or was it less pronounced than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I would start by telling you that there's one thing that I've always chased as a coach. And the best way for me to explain it wasn't even about me. It was an observation that I saw. And these are one of the stories, right, that most people can relate to, because if they do follow swimming, they'll know these athletes very well. And it was the next to the last night of the Olympic Games in 2016. And there were a group of girls on the team that were all Stanford swimmers. So, they had this history of swimming together way before they made the team. And then the way that making the team works with the U.S. is you go to the Olympic trials, and that's a very grueling 8-day swim meet. Mm-hmm. Then you get to go home for 2 or 3 days, and then you come together as a team. And it's usually somewhere a little less than 50 athletes make the team. Sometimes there's 42. It depends on how many people double in events. You have 2 in each event making the team. I think in 16 we had 44 swimmers make the team. And so you come together as a team, and then you go to a domestic camp for 2 weeks. Then you go to an international camp for 2 weeks. And then you go into the village about 4 days before the actual meet starts, so you can acclimate to the village. But these 4 girls had a very deep history in training together prior to this. And their coach at Stanford, Greg Meehan, was also on staff there. And the 4 girls that I'm talking about are Katie Ledecky, which is pretty much a well-known name at this point, Simone Manuel, who the first Black female to win a gold medal in swimming, Leah Neal, another Black female athlete that made the Olympic team. This was her second Olympic team. And Maya Dorado, who sort of became the sweetheart of the Olympic Games in terms of females. And Maya had just swam the 200 backstroke, and she had won it in like the last 5 meters on a touch. And there's no way she should have beaten the competitor that she beat. And if you can think about 4 years of training together, think about going to the trials and battling through that to make the team. Think about the month together working real hard to prepare yourself for what's going on. and then all of the stresses that go into competing at an 8-day swim meet at the Olympic Games. And I just happened to be walking from the way that the venue is structured at the Olympic Games is you have the competitive pool, which is really about all that people watching it on TV see. I think they let you come back to the warm down pool occasionally, but not very often, because that's sort of a place where you're really taking care of business to go perform. So they don't like many distractions. And in between, there's this media parade where people, after they compete, they have to go through this line of reporters that are shoving mics into your face. They're throwing cameras into your face. And they're asking you questions. If you've had a tough swim, they aren't easy questions to answer. And if you've had a great swim, then they're celebrating them. So Maya had just come through there, and she's walking down these stairs to the warm-up, warm-down pool. I, by chance, happened to be there. And I see Maya come down, and Greg is standing there with her, waiting for her, along with Katie Ledecky, Leah Neal, and Simone Manuel. And they're all kind of looking at each other. You okay?
Greg's the head coach.
Yes, Greg's the head coach. And they're all kind of looking at each other, and they are so emotionally and physically exhausted from what they've been through. And yet they're so excited for all of that time and hard work that they put in together. Their faces look gaunt. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you see them start to cry. They know they shouldn't cry, but they have no way to not cry. They are so tired and so exhausted that they have no defense for emotion or not showing emotion. And I captured that moment, and it's the kind of moment we celebrate in these different, like, pictures you see in the newspaper, pictures you see in magazines on these athletes who they have finished doing something and they just don't have any control of their emotions. And that's what I've always chased. I know that that's what I've always chased. I can see it in a local swim meet where a kid has done something and he looks back at his coach, or he looks back at his teammates, and it's like just this moment of appreciation for what you've done together to get to something that you never thought you would reach.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jack, what do you think makes a great Olympian in your mind? Do you think these are people born this way? Is it a function of, how you're wired, nurtured, the home life, all of these things? Like, what makes a great Olympian, especially having an appreciation for what it takes to be a great swimmer, the discipline and the early hours and the long hours and all of these things?
Yeah, I believe that you do have, you can't avoid these kind of God-given genetic qualities that are just freakish. I mean, if you look at Michael, I don't know how many people would know this, but Michael and I could share the same pair of blue jeans. Like, he had a 28-inch waist and a 30-inch inseam. He's 6'4" and I'm 5'7". So he had just this huge upper body torso that, like, of course that's going to benefit swimming, right? So you can't avoid that. And then, there are also these other qualities that are challenging to them. So many of them are OCD, and that's what drives them as well. But if we want to talk about the things that aren't freakish to them genetically or mentally challenging to them, every one of them are extremely optimistic. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that they don't get discouraged and they don't become negative at times, but they genuinely believe that no matter what's happening, they're going to figure it out. And I saw that so often when they have a bad swim, when something goes wrong, or they become injured in practice, it just like it gives them more drive. And I know that mental toughness is something that some people are born with to a larger degree than other people, but it is a trainable ability. And the challenge of training mental toughness is things have to be bad before you can train it. And no one wants to be trained when things are bad. So most of them have a mental toughness about them that has either been trained or they were born with, and they just will not be denied. It seems it's more painful for them to go for it and fail than not to be able to go for it.
You made an interesting quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it, in Swimming World article that was done on you about, it was almost like the vulnerability behind going for it 100% and giving it your all and actually failing, as opposed to having the built-in excuse that you could have given more. I thought that was a really fascinating sort of quote.
Yeah, well, thank you. And this is really the part of the sport that I just absolutely am obsessed with. And I'll tell you why. At one point in my life, I was a competitive surfer. I was actually a surfer kind of forced to compete. I was much better in free surfing, where I was just out on my own, than I was in competition. And I'll never forget actually making the finals of a competition in Jacksonville, Florida. No, it was at Daytona Beach, Florida. And in the finals of this particular competition, there are only 3 people that make it to the finals. And one guy was always the one that was just always winning, always winning, always winning. And once again, I find myself struggling in competition. And I remember him paddling by me and looking at me and going, "Roach, when are you going to stop worrying about what might go wrong?" And I thought, holy smokes, this guy knows me better than I know myself. And he was absolutely right. And if you start to look at, if you really start to look at people, it doesn't matter what you're doing, but you're likely in business and certainly in my craft, you're always competing, right? I mean, you're trying to measure the work that you've put in and how it's going to, how well you're going to perform with the work that you put in. And I think fundamentally, I can now look at a young person and look at the way that they're setting up their life, and are they doing it to see how much they can accomplish, or are they trying not to fail? Mm-hmm. And that's such a huge component to the way you're going to approach competition, because most of them will say, no, Jack, I want to see what I can accomplish. But you put them in competition and you start to see the tension, you start to see the fear, you start to see the body language, and no, that's not the way they're structuring their life. And I found that was probably my biggest responsibility as a coach. I mean, we have the internet now. I didn't feel like I could at any point get the kind of advances that you used to could get before the internet, when, training's there. Everybody can learn from everybody else on how to train someone. So if you become a student of the sport and you start to understand the different energy systems, if you start to understand the different kind of the quad program for someone that you're trying to get at the Olympic Games, when you start to understand long-term athlete development, that's all out there for everybody. There are only 3 things that you can train. It's the body, the mind, and your craft. So if you're training your craft, you understand what good stroke looks like, then you're going to be good at that. You can teach tactics and racing. All of that stuff's available. And then when you talk about the body, all that stuff can be measured. You can't measure what's going on in someone's mind. Mm-hmm. So we're getting better, but we still kind of avoid it because we don't know how to deal with it. And until you understand how a young person makes decisions, you don't have the ability to give them any advice that's going to be sound. You have to understand how they make their decisions. And that means you have to go very deep with them. And that's reflecting back on Colorado Springs. That's what I was allowed to do with those guys. I could spend hours with Michael, my house, coffee shops, walks. Almost every one of the people over the last 3 Olympic Games, I spent an enormous amount of time with. And that it just gave me the insights that I needed to firm them up when things started to collapse a little bit.
Yeah, you talk a lot about the focus of these athletes and how they were such perfectionists, and they knew down to each individual stroke which they did right and which they did wrong. I thought that was pretty profound, because I know that some of these people are doing, swimming a quarter mile in a race or more. That perfectionism, I think, is something that we could all learn from as craftsmen or tradesmen or whatever it is that we do within the business world. So I just thought that was profound, that they could tell you, I was on lap 3 and this stroke was wrong. I mean, that really resonated with me.
Well, so many of these guys, I mean, you think of how many strokes you take in a mile, you think about how many strokes you take in, well, it doesn't even matter. Like let's just for an example, if you're swimming a 100 freestyle as a male, you're likely going to take 16 strokes the first 50 and maybe 17 the second or 18 the second, because you don't have the dive and you're starting to fatigue. So your stroke starts to shorten out a little bit. The athletes that really work on how they can improve, they start to count the number of steps in their house when they're walking up it. I mean, they are counting stroke every single workout, every single set. And these guys are going 6,000 to 8,000 meters a day, sometimes twice a day. And stroke count becomes so big to them because that's efficiency. And the people, then you add in the ability under pressure to drop into direct perception, where you are really focused in on what you're doing at that moment. And you watch someone like a Michael or an Aaron Pearsall, or the people that really sustained winning year after year and quad after quad. And those people, because they're so aware of what they need to do, and they're so into what they're doing at that moment, they can make these small, like micro corrections that no one else would see. Like, I don't think I ever saw Michael take a bad stroke in any competition, but of course he did. Of course he took bad strokes, but he was so aware of being in that moment and doing what he needed to do that the correction was made so quickly that it wasn't obvious to the naked eye.
It reminds me of, my dad was in motor racing for many, many years, and some of those years professionally. And they always say that last, half second to 0.2 of a second is the hardest to find, right? Everybody out there that you're racing against is bold and has the pedal down as far as they can. But, my friends ask me, what's the difference between a good race car driver and a great? Me, it comes down often to braking. Who can brake at the last possible second before that turn comes? And that surprises people. But that last little bit, which is, I think, what you're talking about, right? Just getting that little edge requires that level of focus and concentration and detail that maybe the next guy just doesn't have because of whatever reason. Maybe he's not quite just as hungry, or maybe doesn't have the attention to detail. Maybe he's relied on his genetics or talent or what have you. But I just find those parallels just very interesting to sort of contrast.
Yeah, we call that in swimming, and I guess everywhere else, it used to be called being in the zone. And now they've turned the term to flow state. And I think everyone wants to operate in that place where they are real clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that's mindfulness, right? It's when you're walking, when you're outside, just like, or sitting outside drinking coffee or walking down the street, and you're just enjoying what's going on in your life in that particular moment. That's a special feeling. And that's being mindful when you're in that moment and observing everything's coming at you so slowly, but it's so appreciated. Well, the difference in that and then falling into flow state and competition is all of a sudden you're adding pressure. And to be able to do that under pressure is a completely different challenge. And that's what the real good people do so well. I mean, they'll say that they won't find it all the time. But I just did a clinic with a girl named Katie Miley on Saturday, and Katie won a bronze and a gold medal in Rio. And she was talking about her race in the 100 breaststroke where she won a bronze medal, and she didn't remember the swim. And that's normally what happens. It happens so fluidly, and it's so, I don't know how else to explain it except that there is no tension in your mind with what you're doing. It's kind of like this thought process that's going through, and it's so expanded, and it's so visually easy to accept that you just don't know what's going on, and yet you get out and go, holy smokes, that was the perfect race.
Yeah, must be a great feeling. And my in the previous show that I did with Danny Cannell, he talked about being in the zone when his team, Florida State, came back against one of the biggest deficits in college football history. And he said that was just everything just slowed down. And, I can't imagine having that feeling and just tuning the crowd out and all of those things that happen that you hear about from others telling their experience, but it's probably hard to simulate that or relay it to somebody else. But he also talked, I'm skipping back to another concept about the mindset of these great athletes. And he talked about something I thought was fascinating, in which he really expressed that he had wished he had worked harder in his years playing professional football. He never did anything wrong, was never late, dependable, never got in trouble, any of those things. But, as a leader of the team, he felt like he could have put in the extra time to get that extra edge we talked about. But one concept he brought up that I thought was fascinating was how some of the greats, guys like Tom Brady, how they almost would psych themselves out into believing a alternate reality to get themselves to the point where, like he had something to prove. Let's say, for instance, that he's won 6 Super Bowl rings, but he's still convincing himself, oh, these guys think I'm too old. These guys think I don't have an arm anymore. They think I can't do it. I'm soft. I've made all the money. And I just thought that was a fascinating sort of case study in psychology, and just curious as to, if that's something that you see, with your athletes in your experience.
Wes, anger is this powerful tool, right? And I don't think you go to that well very often. And it's not for everyone. And I'm not saying that that's what Tom Brady does, but I do see anger as being this beautiful motivator that, you see it all the time where somebody will prove a point because somebody else made them mad. It's probably not the healthiest way to go through.
They talk about Michael Jordan, right? That chip on his shoulder from not making his high school team, which it just gave him that edge that he had something to prove. And at the end of the day, I don't think he has anything to prove to anybody, but I think it certainly can be a great motivator. And it just goes to show you just never know what's going on inside somebody's mind. Sort of kind of winding up a lot of these thoughts. I'm just curious, you mentioned it before, you're a combat veteran, served our country in Vietnam. As a coach, somebody that was involved in leadership for many, many years and helping these swimmers that we talked about. Is there any sort of principles or maxims that you've learned over the years that you think could apply to the workplace and those people trying to be, this country primarily now is a service-based economy, right? I mean, we don't make that many things anymore. And most of the things that we do in this country are service-based. And by that, I mean people. It's all people serving other people. And so I think that, my experience is that leadership is really a key, crucial factor in the success of a business, especially as you grow, because they say the complexity, every time your sales triple, the complexity of your business increases tenfold. So by tenfold, most of that is people, right? Different people, different places, different personalities, different backgrounds, different experiences and skill sets and all of those things. And I'm just curious, as somebody like you who has dealt with people and been a leader of people in different contexts like the military and swimming, what is it that makes a great leader, and what is it that you think would be most relevant to bring into the workplace?
I often think about, I think I heard Pete Carroll use this phrase, but learn the learner. And if you're leading, you have to, once again, when we talked about it a little bit earlier, you have to understand how people make the decisions that they make. And for me, it was always about grabbing someone and going, let's sit down and let's talk about this. Like, I want to know what you think you do well. And I'm going to share with you what I think you do well. And let's write it down. There's a lot to be said for mapping in the brain if you handwrite stuff out. So I would often meet with people one-on-one, notebooks in hand, and start to ask questions that are going to be pertinent to help them drive performance. And it's sort of like a growth mindset is like that to me is a big deal. From what I understand with mindset is that someone will develop a habit, right? And all of a sudden someone will tell them to do something, and it's a coach talking to an athlete right now is the way that I'm discussing this. And it's something that the athlete doesn't want to do, and yet the coach knows it should be done. The athlete's first thoughts are, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. I'm tired. I just don't feel like doing that. And then if you can start to understand the habits that have kind of grown in that athlete that has created that first reaction is one thing, but how do you address it with that athlete to change that first reaction to another one? Well, what can we benefit from if we do this, even though you don't want to do it? And that's just a very small, simple example of what I think when I believe that when you're talking about leadership, just drill down into the person you're working with and get to know them and understand, like, the people and events that shape their lives. Like, what's their mother like? What's their father like? Get to know their background. And the more you can learn about that, then you become real clear on how they make decisions. And then I learned this wonderful lesson. You hear these business terms, fail forward, fail fast, fail frequently, right? And I know all of those, they're very good. And it's not a bad thing to do, although certain businesses can't afford that. It's just not affordable. And, in sport, it is something that we can hang our hat on. And, it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to continue to make the same mistakes. And so I was asked to speak with the 2014 Olympic snowboarders in Park City, Utah in 2014. And I went up there, and they're showing me around their facility. Their Olympic Training Center is up there. And there was no snow there at the time. And so these snowboarders were in this skateboard park. And they were doing these different tricks on skateboards. And I watched this one guy go up and do this spectacular trick, but he doesn't make it. And he's just sprawled out all over this concrete. Scooter, no! No, go, go. I can't shape their behavior, much less an athlete's.
Yeah, we'll have to edit that out, Jack.
And so I'm watching this guy. He's bleeding. His knees are bleeding. He's got his cheek. It's all rashed up. No, quit it. Go. And I watch all the other skateboarders grab their skateboards, flip them over, and start to tap them on the concrete. And all of a sudden you have 25 skateboarders tapping their skateboards on the concrete. And that was like saying, we saw you go for that. We know you didn't make it, but what an effort. And what a wonderful clicking sound to hear, right? I mean, that is the celebration of failure. That's a visual that you can see that really emphasizes the importance of celebrating failure. Because I do know this, the only way to get better with something is to take a risk. It's like walking out on the ledge. Every opportunity you have to see if you're going to be able to have the tools to stay on that ledge, even though you're at the edge of it. And every now and then you're going to fall. But if you quit walking out on that ledge, it's back to what we talked about earlier. Are you fundamentally trying to set your life up to see what you can accomplish or not to fail? You can stand back 2 feet from the edge of that ledge and you aren't going to get better at what you're doing.
Yeah.
You can go to that ledge and you can slip every now and then develop the skills to handle that walk to the edge.
Yeah, I think the greats in the world that I navigate in are those that took risk. They managed it to the best of their degree, to their ability, but they definitely took risks and they did it often. And so certainly I can see why that would apply in your world. Just sort of shifting gears over, as you demonstrated, you're a bit of an animal lover. And so you had 2 labs that are 7, 8 years old. And then you decided once you moved to Virginia, you're going to get another one. So I'm a lab lover myself. I've been there, but what is it for you, Jack, about dogs that you love? And
yeah, they just really bring such great joy to my life. I do exercise with them. When I had Katie and Schooner, those are the ones that will be 10 years old next month. In Colorado, we would trail run all the time. They were my companions in trail running. And, for me, exercise is a mindful practice. It's if I have to get outside to exercise. I can't exercise in a gym. And, you get this peripheral vision and you can get to a point of almost exhaustion. And then all of a sudden you see something that is so beautiful that you're tired enough to really appreciate it. And like having spent that time with my dogs and sharing those experiences with them, it's just different than being with a person. Nothing said, but that connection is it's very rich for me, and it's hard to really articulate it other than saying that I feel it a whole lot. And getting another one probably was a mistake. But as you can see, that doesn't happen if he's not in the mix. And I didn't walk him far enough this morning. I was kind of behind the 8 ball. And yeah, he's created a dynamic that's challenging for me.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my first act as a young adult out of college was to buy a house and then get a Labrador puppy. So that was my firstborn son, and I really miss him to this day. He was 14 years old when we put him down, and he was there for both of my kids being born, and he really was like a son. He was an incredible creature. And when I'd go out of town, I'd have various friends stay at the house that were usually, younger guys that were single and, had the time and energy to do that. And I remember texting my one buddy. I said, "Hey, how's Charlie doing?" He wrote me back just one sentence. He said, "That dog loves the water more than I love anything in life." So I know he's telling
Charlie. Yeah, Charlie. When you lose a dog.
What's that?
When you lose the dog, there are just no bad memories. No bad memories at all.
One of the great moments, which was obviously very bittersweet. When we put him down, we were able to very thankfully find a veterinarian that would come to the house. So I didn't have to take him somewhere that obviously most dogs get very nervous about. And she was a very sweet lady that came to the house, and I can't imagine doing that for a living. But she came, and we talked to the kids a few days before and said, hey, here's what's going to happen, and he's in a lot of pain. And they said, Dad, we want to be there. And my kids at the time were, I want to say 10 and 8. And I was, no, it's just really traumatic for you. And I kind of had an epiphany at the moment that, it was a sign of deep maturity to me that they wanted to be there to send him off, and they didn't want him to be scared. And they were there, man. It was really a cool moment. I'm kind of tearing up just thinking about it, but he was very much at peace. I'm convinced that he was ready to go. But the fact that my kids, loved him enough that they wanted to be there was a pretty special moment as a dad, to be honest with you. So we miss him. We've got a Chihuahua now. I think maybe we'll upgrade to a Labrador again at some point. The only thing I don't miss is the tumbleweeds in the house. But so anyway, I just had a couple of quick, rapid fire little questions to kind of close us out. Is there a quote or a saying that you live by or draw inspiration from?
There are actually two, and one is every day is an opportunity to co-create a masterpiece, and that obviously is based on being able to spend time with young people and do the best I can to influence them and to put them in a place where they can become a rainmaker, if nothing else, in their own home. And then the other is hold fast and stay true. And that's an old maritime saying. When ships were made of wood and men and women were made of steel, they would go out into heavy weather, and they would have these huge waves breaking over the bow of their boat. They would start to yell, hold fast to each other. And that means to grab a hold of something that's been there, something that has weathered what you're going through, and know that holding on to them will help you get through. And then the stay true is remember why you started the journey to begin with. When you start to lose track of why you're doing something because it becomes too hard, go back to why you started that journey and hold fast, stay true. I just think it's a wonderful saying.
I love that. How about a book you would recommend? I'm sure that's probably not easy, but.
Well, I love the message that Siddhartha teaches, Herman Hesse book. I don't know if you've ever read it, but that's a beautiful story. And then the other one is a very simple book. It's called First You Have to Learn to Row a Little Boat. It's by Richard Bode, and all of these cool life lessons and sailing and what you can learn from sailing. And I can really relate to that.
What was the first book by Siddhartha, you said?
Siddhartha is the first book by Herman Hesse.
Gotcha. Advice to your 25-year-old or young self?
Yeah, although I believe that I got this advice at a very young age out of a lesson learned, not from someone else, but Wes, when I got out of Vietnam, I have felt my whole life like I'm living on borrowed time. I did not believe that. It was hard for me to understand why I got out and some other friends that I had didn't. And when I say I'm living on borrowed time, I constantly am asking myself if I'm not utilizing my idle time in a way that's productive, what those people would think if they were watching me, like sitting on the couch watching Netflix in the middle of the day. And that would be my lesson. How do you honor the people that have influenced your life by living your life that way?
What would your billboard say, Jack?
Yeah, work locally, think globally.
Work locally, globally.
Yeah.
I like that. Last but not least, the best piece of advice your mom or dad ever gave you?
Yeah. It's the way that they kind of taught me to live my life, and that's to follow my dreams, but have daily intentions through that process.
Yeah, I love that. This has been great. I could go on all day. I'm sure you had plenty more to offer, but I want to be respectful of your time and really enjoyed this chat. And I hope it's the first of many more.
Well, thanks, Weston. Obviously, it's important to me that there's some takeaways here for the people that you have interest in and care about and want to see.
Parting words right there.
Parting words. But thank you so much for this time, Wes. It was great. I hope I honored what you were trying to do.
With flying colors, Jack. Absolutely.